very irresponsible, very irresponsible. And I think the president of Nigeria needs to start thinking seriously about the Fulanis and the Biafra in that space, and make sure that he preaches, oh, we have our democracy institutions are being challenged. And when you are sitting in that office, you have not even followed one rule of those democratic processes. We cannot in Africa in this day and age tolerate any leader. We cannot tolerate any leader who continues to be a puppet of Western powers to abuse our own local people. That time is up. Purely African, for Africa is for Africans.
You know, this fight is not just a fight between African and America, African and France. It's African to African. Between Africans are fighting each other. See, look at the way this man explained. Joshua Ponga. This man, since this could happen in Niger, this man has been one of the most controversial in his statement. How he disagreed with the ECOWAS and Tinubu way of approach, the way they approach the Niger, the sanction. Tinubu and ECOWAS were too quick to sanction Niger, to cut off their electricity. See how this man explained. This man has serious message to Africans leader. You don't want to miss it. Just hear how he explained. You will understand.
Very important message that I would like to pass on to our African leaders, to ECOWAS leaders in particular, and to African leaders in general. And to ECOWAS, because I want to pitch our conversation around the Niger sanctions. And to African political leaders, this includes opposition leaders in Africa and all other African leaders out there who are young and aspirant to become leaders. And I would speak in the context of South Africa, I would speak in the context of Uganda, I'm speaking in the context of Namibia, Zimbabwe in particular also, and other African nations also in general. Now I'll start off first with the sad news that we've had about sanctions that have been pushed forward to Niger from ECOWAS. ECOWAS, which is the Eastern Africa, East, South, Eastern African, Western, whatever, trade platform that they've created out there, as contrasted to SADC in the South and etc. That now they're cutting off resources and cutting off supplies into Niger. And what these organizations must remember, number one, it is that those sanctions that they are putting forward, they will only go to damage and destroy their fellow African people. And it is not right that you will make the poor people suffer, because sanctions by nature, they are intended to put pressure on the government and force the regime that is in power to hand over power back to the colonial system. Now we have known for the longest of time, Burkina Faso, Togo, Mali, Senegal, Niger, and many of the Francophone countries have been for the longest of time being forced to put more than 85% of their annual taxes and monies into the French banks, and then when they want the money back, they must be paying interest. I think Mama Chihombori did a brilliant program on that. You can Google it up and check it out. She used to be the United Nations, the representative of Africa on the United Nations space there, on the Africa Union, sorry. And having said that, sanctions have never been to the advantage of the local people, because when you cut down the resources on the local people, it is a foreign agenda, because the commercial and business interests of the West are being challenged. And France was very clear, and even Biden this morning was very clear, that Niger must expect a very strong repercussion for the decisions that she has made. And that decisions means that there may be interventions that are coming to restore the American interests, to restore the French interests. Now, I read something also this morning that was interesting, that after America blew up the Nord Stream gas pipe that was supplying Europe, their option and alternative was to build another gas pipeline from Niger into Europe, inclusive of the uranium that is being taken off. And Niger, it looks like it's putting a stop to that. So the American plan is fallen dead to the ground. The Nord Stream is no longer working. The Niger pipeline is no longer working. And the uranium which they had opted to get from Niger is no longer working. Now, because Americans and British and Europe are pumping money into ECOWAS, and they're pumping money indirectly because they're in control of the leaders of those countries. and they're not interested in democracy. Because if they were interested in democracy, they would have been discussing the Biafra story in Nigeria, for example. But it looks like most of the Francophone leaders that have been there for the longest of time have been mainly stooges and puppets of the French government. And they go to Paris and they get a tap on the shoulder, and then they come back home and they're told to manage the Western interest. Niger is suffering from electricity problems and cuts off, and yet it is producing uranium that is giving the European countries the power that they need. So the best plan is, if they want the uranium, if they want power, open up the power in Niger and take the power to where you want it, so that when you put the power stations in the places where the raw materials are being found, you are creating jobs also, and the local communities can benefit. So number one, sanctions by nature are a means of war. Sanctions are a means of war. In fact, sanctions are war, but the war is being fought on the civilians. So you cut down supplies, and when you cut down the supplies, then the people are going to revolt. Now I hear that price of wheat and price of rice, price of bread is shot into the sky. So fuel will follow. So just like what happened to Zimbabwe. And I don't know how long it will take African countries to understand that the way this Western world treat each individual country will not change. Immediately you tamper with the Western interests, you are bound to suffer the consequences. What are the consequences? The consequences are sanctions. So what happens when there are sanctions? No more donor money, no more support structures. And on top of that, their supplies are being cut off. Electricity, water, medical aid, medical supplies, together with power supplies and other things. And then when those things happen, one step further down, people will become unhappy, people become restless. When people become restless, people will start war. And when they start war, then they will topple off their government. And when they topple off their government, you come in as Europeans as if the one that wants solutions. So when you fix the solution, then you put another leader that is prone to you, and then this is how it has been happening. Congo for the longest of time. Zimbabwe, we're just breaking off now, but we're still stuck in sanctions. Now when you begin to listen to African leaders, young leaders, I'm talking particularly to the Uganda leader, the young man there was starting to do some political young movement sort of thing. South Africa, Malema doing the young thing with EFF, Chamisa in Zimbabwe doing the young thing, Namibian youth doing their young thing. I hope that while you're doing your young thing, you're not doing your young thing in colonial money thing, because you cannot in the world at this day and age use sanctions so that people suffer. And when then people suffer, they will vote for you as a leader to assume power. And when they vote for you to assume power, then you are going to enforce not the agenda of the African, but the agenda of the people that have given you money. This is where me and Chamisa cross paths a dozen times. He says we are on sanctions because of corruption. On the other side, I'm saying actually sanctions are a contributing factor to corruption. Because when you close off means of official business dealings, you close down means of production, you put people under sanction. Question, how do you want them to survive? How do you want the government to survive? How do you want the people to survive? So people are going to look for extra methods and ways of survival. And some of those ways of survival might not be necessarily kosher to world business standards. Some of those ways of survival might not be friendly to Western interests. So we want to find out one question. When you are putting someone on sanctions, whose interests are you serving? Whose businesses are you protecting? Yes, African leaders, they are what they are. European leaders, they are where they are. I mean, European leaders, war is business. War is business. They supply each other with weapons. African countries, it is illegal to do business with a fellow African government. Once you have a relationship with the government, it is corrupt. But a British can do business with British government. It's business. An American can do business with Americans. Business. The Chinese can do business with Chinese. It's business. Yeah, Frenchmen can do business with Frenchmen. Business. An African man does business with an African leader. Corruption. Corruption. So you tell me that the whole continent of Africa is corrupt. I beg to differ. Some of these narratives need to be challenged. That it is okay within the armpits of good appetite and good governance, that we should need to develop African leaders who can do business with government and make sure those government deals are safe and secure, free from questions and etc. But yes, it is okay for them to do business with fellow African people. Because if we don't do business with them, who will do business with them? Government is the biggest supplier in any country, and if you are still doing business with private sector and you're not doing business with government, I don't think you've started being serious in any way possible. So we need to start correcting this narrative of it is illegal for an African person to do business with African leaders. And point number 2 that I want to raise, and Nigeria, yes, Nigeria needs to start thinking very seriously, because the president of Nigeria is actually the head of ECOWAS. And if ECOWAS is putting Niger into sanctions, and I think that he's being very irresponsible, very irresponsible. And I think the president of Nigeria needs to start thinking seriously about the Fulanis and the Biafra in that space, and make sure that he preaches, oh, we have our democracy institutions are being challenged. And when you are sitting in that office, you have not even followed one rule of those democratic processes. Method number 2, something that I also want to mention. I want to appeal to the president of Zambia. I want to appeal to the president of Zimbabwe. I want to appeal to the president of South Africa and other African countries, Rwanda and Tanzania. And that, guys, as presidents, please. I know in Zimbabwe right now we have surplus grain. We have surplus wheat that is there. Is it okay that when other countries are being put on sanctions, when our brothers are being put on sanctions, that our neighboring African countries, Cameroon, and who have extra food, we can now begin also to stand together as African countries to protect the interest of our own common people. And if we don't do it, we cannot always be waiting for the Western world to be sending relief to our African countries. It's time now we tell, number 3, we tell all African presidents who are in support of Western sanctions that your day is coming. What you see is starting to happen right now on the African continent. The young people are becoming restless. The young people are becoming impatient. You as African leaders, you have lied for too long. You've lied for too long. Hey, let's vote for me, I'll do this. Vote for me, I'll do this. I'll protect your interest. I'll do this. I'll do this. Get into power. You forget about the people that put you into power. And you continue to oil the hands of the colonial system. You take your children to study in Paris. Take your children to study in New York and in America. Take your children or take your wives to hospitals in Singapore, in China, in Malaysia. But the common people cannot afford those things. And we have been watching for the longest of time. And we will not stop, particularly I will not stop proclaiming this message. That time of lying is over. And if you would listen to me very carefully, honorable presidents, stop oiling the hands of Western and European business people who come to you in the night with briefcases of money, who call you into their countries, come to your hotels with briefcases of money and corrupt. Here, will help you set up a business here. Put your wife and child as proxy. Take some of the money, put it here, will help you to grow and etc. And destroying your own people to supply and oil your own interest. But I think for the longest of time, this kind of behavior has been allowed to continue. So I'm here to alert all the young people that when you have a leader, be it a young leader, be it a senior leader, no matter how much you love them, as long as they support the colonial mandate, the colonial moratoriums, the colonial sanction language, if you hear any African leader who says, yeah, to the Americans, yeah, to the British, when, yeah, to the French, or to the Russians, or to the Chinese, and whatever they are yaying for is destroying common people, you must know that that leader has got a serious problem. Because the interest of this world is not African interests. If they were interested in Africa, by now, poverty, hunger, disease, malaria, I mean, even vaccines for AIDS, HIV, they are there in Europe. But those vaccines will never make their way into Africa. Because Africa must continuously be a problem child who must just be given tablets. And if in case you die or you don't die, but there are vaccines available right now, which will not make their way out into the common market. For what reason? Only the people who have them know better. So we cannot in Africa in this day and age tolerate any leader. We cannot tolerate any leader who continues to be a puppet of Western powers to abuse our own local people. That time is up. Purely African, for Africa is for Africans. And it is time now that as African countries, particularly you as African children, we need to start talking together, working together, supporting each other, putting our voices together to build the Africa that we want. We need to start mobilizing ourselves into this common good interest. I promise you, and I will say it again, if the war breaks out in Niger, I am going personally to Niger to join that army there. I would rather die as a soldier standing than live as a poor servant and slave on the colonial system. It is time as Africans we begin to think together, work together, act together, support each other, particularly on issues of national interest. Because when national interests are tampered with, the sovereignty of countries is tampered with. And there's no way Africa can community of people as long as our politics is being managed by foreign external people who even have the confidence of getting on media spaces and say, we are coming there because we want to protect our interests, our businesses, we want to protect our interests. But how did your interests end up in our countries? How did we become so important in your business, yet when we are not important to ourselves? How did our resources become so important to you that they will even call for your army to come here to our country to protect us from ourselves? That's quite interesting. You leave America to come to Niger to fight the people of Niger because you want to protect interests. Whose interests? American interests. Now, in which ship, in which aeroplane did your interests fly from Washington to Niger? That you must now come here to Niger to protect your interests. Now we know there's no interest here. This is business. This is oil. This is business. This is uranium. This is business. These are our resources, gold. This is business. So the only interest you can be talking about is your business interest. So now you understand, ladies and gentlemen, that African countries are being managed by multinational companies that are in those countries. And these multinational companies stand lots of support from their mother bodies and their countries of origin. McDonald's, KFCs, Coca-Colas, Anglo-Americans, and all these companies that we have out there who are actually not African companies, but international companies. They belong to who? They don't belong to the government of America. No. They don't belong to the government of France. No. These companies are heavily invested with the World Bank, invested with IMF monies that are locked in there, invested with BlackRock, invested with the Oppenheimers, the Rothschild, invested with this cabal. If you think it's a conspiracy, think twice. All your presidents who are not sovereign, they report not to the government, but they report to this body that runs the finances of the world. You could have heard of the New World Order as if it's a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy. There is a meeting place above all governments, where American presidents, where British high monarch sits on that body, and they all report to this conglomerate of not billionaires, but trillionaires, who own sovereign funds, who own IMF, International Monetary Fund, who own World Bank. And through these financial institutions, they are able to direct whether it is coups, or it is wars, or it is relief, or it is disasters. They give money to the ruling party, they give money to the opposition party, and they play who must we put in power and who do we remove. Playing like ponies right there. And in these big bodies, the multinational companies, and I think it's time now, it's time we need to start talking politics and take off our gloves off and just say it as it is. Maybe it's time we stop dealing with poodles. We stop dealing with dogs that are running around the yards as if they own the yard. Meanwhile, they're just protecting the yard. Hoof, 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 hoof. Every night you see something passing. Hoof, something, hoof. You know, Niger is now got a coup. Hoof, you know, there's a coup, you know, hoof, and you're making noise. No, we don't want to deal with the dogs. We want the owners of the house to come forward. So who are these people who have interests in our spaces, to whom we must now face them? I have a beautiful case that I could place for South Africa. I know maybe someone will cut this piece off and get everyone pissed off in South Africa. I'm in South Africa, guys, to be honest with you. Honorable Mbalula, I want you to take my word seriously. This message is directed to you as the Secretary General of the party. That Honorable Mbalula, let's stop wasting time with government meetings and lying. We now have it on record, in good information, that there is a Stellenbosch cabal that runs South Africa. They're there. So since they're already there, how about we cut the whole hoofing story, and we let the people who actually run the country to run the country, and then hold them accountable to what they are running, because they own the greatest part of business here. So whoever they are putting into business and whoever they are putting into politics must protect their business. So instead of dealing with a watchman at the gate, instead of dealing with a hoofing dog that is outside, how about for once, Honorable Mbalula, you can become Secretary General of AfriForum? Yeah, Secretary General of AfriForum. Let's take Rupert or let's take Oppenheimer and make them president. DA can go home to sleep. ANC can go home to sleep. EFF, we can keep them as opposition politics. But in all honesty, we would rather hold Oppenheimer and Rupert accountable for the South African business community and the running of the country. Then we can actually knock on his door and say, we want water, we want electricity, and we are talking to the person who is controlling the president. For me, it becomes very simple. You'd rather start just dealing with the one who is responsible than dealing with the caretaker who is trying to manage the estate for the colonial master. This is the kind of politics that will destroy Africa, where you think that you are voting someone into power, but while they're in power, they are not in control. So let's stop the hoofing business. Beat the dog until the owner comes out. So now we know who is the owner in terms of Niger business. America has made it clear our interests are there. France has made it clear our interests are there. So the enemy of Niger is not Niger. Enemies of Niger are these people who have interests in our economy. So we will no longer tolerate African presidents who hoof around the house, whereas the owners are sleeping on their splash Egyptian cotton sheets. And people once in a while through the window. So who is there? Oh, it's Mnangagwa. More sanctions. Who is there? Oh, it is Toure. Put on sanctions. No. Who is there? Who is passing by? No, get rid of him. Go kill him. Who is there? It is Gaddafi. It's too noisy. Obama, get rid of him. Who is there? No, Saddam Hussein. No good for us. Get rid of him. Who is there? No, that is Lumumba. No, get him out of the window. Who is there? No. We want no more hoofing business. We want no more hoofing business. We want to deal with the owners of the estate who are giving us trouble. And so African leaders, let's start working together. Let's think together. Let's share our resources, our food security for each other. And when you hear that another African country is in trouble, don't laugh about it. You are next.